Reclaiming Timeless Ways, another episode, I believe, number 7. And a series of who knows how many, right, Mike? We just don't know until off air you said until Niagara Falls dry up.
Right.
Maybe these episodes continue,
these waterfalls just seem to keep flowing.
A lot of good information. We love to share it with you, and of course, today yet another topic, another episode, and another discussion to be had. Mike, what direction are we going to be taking today, my friend?
Well, I had this kind of a comedic image to start with, and that's a movie where everybody's head is floating above their body, where there's a space between your head and your body. And if you talk to anybody that's more than, say, 3 or 4, they would look at you and go, that's not right, right? What is that? Are they crazy? The head and the body are connected.
Right.
How come they're separated? What happened? Did they have an accident?
Yeah.
But it's like, so a long, long time ago when I was doing some ministerial training, which I mentioned was not my forte,
Right.
Or my calling as such.
Sure.
I got involved in, first, to begin with, being a guest in a group led by a psychiatrist of cancer patients.
Okay.
And it was a group that focused on mind-body. And they focused on the work of an amazing person named Carl Simonton. And he wrote a book called Getting Well Again. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because he was very snidely referred to for his work. And years later, the whole medical world is looking and going, he was right.
Yeah.
He was right. The things that you think about, the things that you visualize deeply, right? You're going to affect your body with your mind.
Right.
So he tragically he died in an accident, a freak accident. He choked while he was eating dinner.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very sad. But I wound up, getting to know the guy that ran the group well, and I used to just sit there and ask him questions literally for 3 or 4 hours after our group. And I learned from him, And one day he came up to me, might have just come out of the closet and went boo. He said, I want you to run the group. And I'm like, I can't do that, And he's like, yeah, you can. No, I can't. Yeah, you can. No, you can. He goes, I'll be in the room. I just won't be saying anything. So if you're drowning, I'll pull you out of the water.
Very good.
So I did it for about a year. But we would see people reverse the direction of their tumors with the meditation. It was a visualization meditation. Mm-hmm. So it was a remarkable thing. So the organization, I got permission from the woman that runs it, Mrs. Simonton, to mention them as we speak. And they're out in California. It's called Simonton Center. And they work with people who are, who have a grave diagnosis.
Right.
And they help people. When we were doing the work, this was back in the mid-'70s, we were seeing a statistic of a 40% increase in life expectancy when the meditation process was added to surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. And then, and then there's exercise and diet. So, remarkable.
Right.
And I think I mentioned to you once that I thought I was going to get a pass because I did this, but then again, I wound up with my own diagnosis about 11 years ago, and that's, as far as we know, from every couple of years of getting looked at in the past. So apparently visualization is a very important thing. The way I explain it to people to help them understand it is you have to have all your senses involved when you visualize.
Okay.
So if you stand on one side of the kitchen and say to me, Mike, catch this pineapple, I'm going to go, oh, pineapple, heavy, sharp, spinning, going to hurt my hands. I better be very mindful of how this thing is moving and catch it with my hands in agreement to its spin.
Right.
Right? so it's not going to slice me or jab me, right? So what did I just? I mean, I somewhere in the back of my head, I'm thinking, okay, I know what pineapples smell like and I know what they taste like, but I'm more mindful of its weight and its momentum and the characteristics of it being sharp,
Sure.
right? So I'm using all my senses in my thought without even knowing it. The other one that I've heard people describe, and actually when I spoke to Ms. Simonton a few weeks ago about this and just encouraging her work, she said, yeah, the thing that we do is we say to people, we're going to talk about visualization. Everybody goes, oh, that's like this esoteric spiritual stuff. It's very complicated. I can't do it. And she says, I know. Imagine for a moment that you take a tiny slice of lemon and you just put a couple drops in your mouth. She said, what's happening to your mouth right now?
It's funny because as you say that, it's getting a little watery.
Right, and maybe the back of your jaw gets tight. You're going, oh, lemon, right? It's like, it just happens.
Instantly you're salivating and you can feel it. You can sense it.
Boom, right. It's like,
Your mind told you that it's going to be there before it was even there.
oh, absolutely. And it's kind of like, so then she says, now I don't have to convince you because you just convinced yourself,
Yeah.
basically, right?
And so she's saying that's how simple it is, really, is what you're kind of trying to
Exactly.
convey.
Right.
Because honestly, before you went into that little example, my wife is much more connected with her mind and some meditation. In fact, something she's been getting into more lately. And she says, you ought to do this. And I had the same prejudgment
Right.
that you just said a lot of people do.
Right.
That's not my cup of tea. I'm more of a worker. I'm a hands-on.
Right.
I'm a goer. I'm not in tune with that.
Right.
And you're saying it can be easier than maybe I imagined.
Apparently, you're visualizing it being difficult very
There you go,
effectively.
there you go.
You're being perfectly effective at your visualization.
I'm doing it in reverse.
You're
Yeah.
creating what you
Right.
want to create. Yeah,
Right,
it's
right.
like you're being a master, at that literally.
Right.
So one of the stories that I wanted to share was about this fellow who was one of my patients in this facility, and he was a big guy, and he worked in the power industry, and he had a family history of psychosis.
Okay.
He was an extremely nice guy, very smart, and he would just get triggered, and his biochemistry didn't help him.
Yeah.
So he was oriented in that direction to being vulnerable to that. And I sat down with him one day, and we'll call him Jim, it wasn't his name, and I said, when we had established a pretty decent level of rapport based on honesty and trust, I would make fun of the people I didn't like that worked there, and I think he would too. It's been a long time. So he trusted me. Anyway, I asked him, I said, when you have an episode where you have to come running to the nurse's station and get an extra dose of meds, is it just like you fell off a 100-foot building, or is it like one bad memory or one bad thought or one bad sensation, something that triggers you taking one little step down where you get a little bit of angst, right? And then another step and another step. And he goes, I never thought about it. That's what it is. It's a series of steps. It's not just like a volcano showing
Right.
up, boom, out of nowhere, right?
Right. It's building.
Exactly. So I said, okay, so you're spiraling downwards. He said, yeah. And I said, so you're a smart guy. I said, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that you were given a good mind. He said, okay. So I said, so now that we've discussed it, you have the capacity to remember this in spite of the fact that when you experience this first step, you get into something of a panic state, and that sort of overloads your ability to rationally think as easily as normal,
Sure.
but does it cancel it completely? Like, I don't know, I don't think so. I'm gonna have to think about this. Anyway, so I said, my suggestion is play with it and see if you can interrupt the process,
Yeah.
right? If you can't, no biggie, just go get your meds,
Right.
right? If you can, hey, That's different, and something to celebrate. And so he comes up to me a couple of days later. He comes running down the hall. He's about the size of a locomotive. He goes, Mike, I got to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, God, here it comes. He goes, no. He says, it happened the other day. And he said, I remembered what you said. I heard your voice. And he goes, no, I don't mean I heard your voice. I remembered what you said. Because he's talking all this psychobabble, right?
Right.
And so we laughed about that. He goes, I did what we talked about. And I was getting into this panic state where I was losing touch with reality, and I did what you suggested and what we discussed, and it worked. Mm-hmm. And I was able to stop and turn around and go back to my room and not need that dose, and I was okay. I'm like, were you okay for a minute? He said, no, I was okay, period. And I'm like, that's amazing, that's wonderful. Does that mean that will always be the case? I don't know, maybe not. It's an individual thing. But I would say...
But boy, that empowered him.
It sure as hell did, right? And it wasn't me being the professor standing there going...
He did it, you just helped him.
I wasn't there.
Helped him realize it.
Exactly.
That's it.
Right, and his learning curve was remarkable. And that goes back to visualization and as one, like, can I do this? He saw himself do it. So he experienced himself going a minute or a day or a week or a month into the future, having this crap fall down like a giant load of seagull crap on his head. Now what am I going to do? Am I going to flip out, or can I influence this to some degree?
Right.
He could, because he did. And it was like, now does this mean you get an A if you do it every time and an F if you can't do it? No. It means you have more tools. You're more in control. Does it mean that doctors are bad and you don't need them ever? No, it doesn't mean that. You've heard me talk about how some physicians are terribly arrogant. They are. They're also a necessary, an important profession, And while I beat them up, and deservedly so in my opinion, I think anybody that reads into what I'm saying that medicine isn't important or necessary is reading way too much.
Yeah.
I think medicine is extraordinarily important.
Right. You used an example, or you said it so casually, but it's very important to maybe even re-echo. You gave him some tools. I mean, all
Absolutely.
we're doing in every one of these shows
Right.
is talking about experiences and situations that may apply, may not apply to you or someone you know, love, care about, friendship, relationship. And if you can put one more tool in your chest,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I've never tried to fix something with the wrong tool, but having the right one makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have the right tool for the
Absolutely.
job. And if you can put a few more in your chest, your odds of success and whatever might come your way increase.
Maybe 2 or 3 or 5 times greater,
Yeah.
There was a kid I took care of in another facility. He's about 17, 18. He was kind of lanky kid, very delicate, and he was autistic, and he had this unusual gift. If you named a day, like the third Friday of February in the year 2912, he would tell you the date. Boom! Just like that. So he was like a savant. He had this ability to do something that was just... So there was one piece of his brain that was like Einstein
Right.
on brain drugs.
Right.
And the rest of him wasn't. But he had this terrible phobia that he wasn't real. That he just didn't exist. And it would come on him and he would just lose it completely. And I liked this kid tremendously. He was just a sweet, wonderful kid. And I remember I was out running one day and he ran past me like a deer. It was unbelievable. I mean, I had worked my butt off for over a year to get faster and faster, and he just was like, it was funny. But we would do this thing where, I don't want to say his name, but I would say, he'd be standing next to me talking to me, and he had this very rapid rate of speech and very high-pitched, like a little 11-year-old kid. And it could be kind of funny, irritating in a funny way,
Yeah.
And like the enthusiasm that never stops.
Sure.
And anyway, so I would look at somebody else in the room and I would say, has anybody seen Billy? You know, that's not his name, but they would look and I'd say, so they'd go, no, I haven't seen him. He's like, I'm right here, Mike. You know I'm here. And I was like, I haven't seen him all day. Have you? No, I haven't heard him. Have you? And he's like, him here. And he'd laugh. So what we did is because, again, trust. Trust is such a...
Oh. That word, I don't even know how many exclamation points and underlines and capitalizes it needs, but to make anything work in a relationship world, boy, is that a key word.
Right. You know, if that person isn't there to protect you, your reputation, your physical well-being, your relationship, your money, if they're not there to do all of those things as an integral part of what they are, they're not your friend. Right? So anyway, he would just be standing there laughing his ass off, you know. Come on, Mike, here I am, I'm here, man. And he would just lose it. And all the time we were doing that, I was doing this comedy theater with him, pressing the buttons that caused his terror.
Right, that he wasn't there.
Right. But it was absurd. And he was getting completely desensitized to it,
right.
At least in my presence,
right?
Because I wasn't mean, right?
Right.
Some of the world is mean, some is not.
Right.
But at least in that selective area, he kind of got the beginning of the sense that this was not happening.
Right.
This was funny. It was the theater of the absurd,
right.
You know? So some little sliver of him was raised up, was given a life preserver. Now, do I know all these years later how he did? He was such a delicate human being. I don't know. I don't know. And I didn't have the, the wherewithal to discover that. It would be interesting to find. He would be 60 now. Not a child anymore, you know.
But still pretty amazing, and Mike, yet just again, both of those stories you told recently have a factor of trust that are really crucial and important to be able to take that next step with somebody. It doesn't work without it, but again, just a couple tools, some outside the box thinking, again, not replacing medical attention. You're saying here are some things. The mind is powerful.
Oh, it is.
We all know that, but these are some just small pieces or applications that you put into play that prove that show that, and you weren't even doing it in a schooled way. You did it in just a relationship, friendship way.
It was more relationally based, right?
Yeah.
And, you keep looking at this again and again and again, and after a while, if it matters to you, you understand that one of the fundamental things is not that you maneuver somebody into trusting you.
Right.
It's that you create trust.
Sure.
That you are not, that you don't do trust.
Right.
You are trustworthy.
Right.
It's not theater.
Right.
You know? And that brings me to this next story.
I sense it's a story of course, Mike. There's a chuckle behind that. I'm thinking, oh boy, where is he taking us?
So I was a little kid, and we go to my grandparents' neighbor's home, Mr. and Mrs. D.
Yeah.
And they seemed like one of the happiest couples, very animated and just always really joyous and cordial and wonderful. And there was something so sweet and magical about them. So we go like 3 or 4 houses. This was on Miller Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. So we go over to their house, knock on their door, and you hear like, can't really make it out. So knock on the door again. I got a couple of my cousins with me, and nothing. So I kind of pushed my hand against the door, and the door opens up. So I open the door, and we go inside. Mr. and Mrs. D, hello. Nothing. So I'm saying, all of a sudden you hear guys screaming at her, just in a rage, right? And he's swearing at her, you stupid. And she's like, you. And I'm like, whoa. So, I'm like, wow, this is not like them. And so we go slowly calling them repeatedly from the front door through the living room and the big old brick house, And we finally wind up winding through the living room. I think we went through the dining room into the kitchen. I'm like, hello, and we can hear them screaming but I'm looking all around the room. There's nobody in the room except the minor bird.
A bird?
A bird. He had made a recording of the reality. These two people were hateful to each other. And all this cordiality and wonderful, vim and vigor and joy was not the whole story,
right,
by a long shot.
Yeah.
They were hateful. And I was like, I'd seen my parents have some fights. They would get into these rages of silence for the most part,
sure,
where they just resented the hell out of each other. But this was like two volcanoes having a spitting contest. And I was just like, wow. So we sneak back out the house, close the door, go back to my grandparents' house, tell my folks. And my folks told my grandparents. So the next time we visited, we wanted to find out how the bird was. Oh, they don't have the bird anymore.
The bird broke their trust.
It was like the bird told the truth.
Yeah.
He was screwed. So, we think maybe Blackie was dinner or something. Excuse me, or they just set him loose. But I remember sitting there with my mouth kind of hanging open in my head, in my mind's eye, thinking, they really fooled me.
Yeah.
It was like everything about them flowed, and it was like, the way they moved was so relaxed and so happy and so comfortable and so easy, and it was just this natural comfort, and it wasn't true.
Right.
And I was like, wow. And that was like a little awakening.
Yeah.
And it still blows me away when I get it, when somebody does that, and I'm like, you son of a, you fooled me.
Yeah.
How many times will it ever stop, or are people sometimes that masterful at it, right? And you got to wonder, if these two idiots had used that same amount of energy to treat each other with decency and protect each other and differentiate between needs and wants, right? What do you need? Or what is it that would actually make you not feed your addiction, but what would actually make you happy, right?
Because we all have gifts, Mike. It's how we choose to use them. It's a little bit of an embellishment, but I might have even mentioned this on a previous show. I watch a lot of Marvel movies. I've got a 9-year-old boy, and we watch them.
Yeah.
So there's superheroes versus villains. I mean, that's the
right,
concept.
right.
And when we first kind of were explaining it, and he's asking questions, Dad, why is so-and-so bad, and why is so-and-so, they all have, in a sense, equal powers, given some sort of a extra power.
Right.
And it's what they choose to do with it.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what you're saying with these individuals. You take that same energy and do something good, or do you feed that addiction and that problem, that issue, and it consume you in a sense? I mean, in every one of those villains, greed, it's kind of a fun story because it's an embellished version of what humans
There's a
do.
Y in the road.
Right.
I have this power. I have a powerful hand, or I have a powerful speaking capacity, or, what am I going to do with it?
Do I go spread joy, or do I bamboozle people out of money selling something they don't need?
Yeah, do I become Madoff?
Right.
Right?
Right.
$40 billion.
Exactly.
And I mean, some of the most famous people who had achieved some, like Elie Wiesel, he screwed Wiesel out of, I think, $200,000 or $300,000. The rest of his life was kind of trashed because of that. And it's like, these were people who had extraordinary insight,
Yeah.
more than, and they talked about it, they taught it, they wrote about it, they wanted to share this, and they got fooled. So one of the things, one of the lessons is you can get fooled. It's
Yeah.
like, it's not like go hide in shame. It's like, damn it, I'm a human being, I can get fooled.
Yeah.
And if I learn how to not get fooled by that game, there are still other games,
Sure.
you know. So it's not like the whole world is going to do that, but some of the world. And so I've got another note here because there's a series of mind things. There was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and I heard him speaking about this years ago. And I don't think this was a metaphor. I think this was an actual event. He had a boy who was a patient. He was maybe 8, 10 years old, thereabout. And the kid was having this recurrent hallucination that there was a monster in the room. And if you can imagine something three-dimensional, sort of like Taz, but not funny,
Sure.
right? Like this massive thing, just this enormous frame, long, 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 deadly claws and deep fangs, right? And it would get in front of him and just be raging and on the verge of like just mauling him, right? And so the doctor explained to the kid, he wanted him to really explain what this thing looked like and its behavior. And he did, and he said, well, how does it feel to talk about it? It's terrible, just terrible. And he goes, well, did he do it once? I said, no. I said, oh, did he do it twice? I said, no. He said, what did you think was going to happen? He goes, he was going to kill me. He was going to just tear me like if you shredded a piece of paper in a rage, right? Like that. And he goes, did he do it 10 times? It's like more than 10 times. So did he do it 100 times? More. It was like 100 times. And each time you knew that it was going to kill you. He said, yeah. And he goes, well, how many times did you get very badly banged up or cut?
Right.
He goes, never got really banged up. He goes, well, how many times did you get deeply slashed? Never. How many times did it bite you? Never. Oh, how many times? More than 100 times, way more. Like every day for like a year, at least. It's like every single time, every time you knew that this whole list of things was going to happen to you, and out of those hundreds of times of all these maybe 10 different deadly things happening to you, not one time did any of those things happen to you. So what does that tell you? Kid never saw it again. It was like, oh, wow. Well, there's a blessing, you know, blessing that he didn't see it anymore, and a blessing that the guy was telling him, you have the evidence within you that this is a cartoon. This is a brilliantly contrived cartoon that you have created, you know? And, you know, whatever happened to him again, we don't know.
But it does, and I know we're just about out today, and I don't know if this is a true story or just one my parents told me. I never did the research. But either way, they were sort of explaining what today's show has been about and the power of that mind, and going back to the beginning when it's floating above, you know, that being the pictorial of what you think you have to be in order to be in tune and meditate, which is not what you have to do. You're showing the strength of the mind in every one of us and how we all do it, maybe at a different level.
Sure.
And so you can tune into that tool. But she said they found a guy once, it was a guy was found in a rail car, and it was a refrigerated rail car. Mm-hmm. And they could see by the writing, he was found, passed away, on the writing where he had put colder, and he had written with his finger on the wall in some capacity, like scratched it in or smudged it with his print. And when they found him, of course, passed on, the car was never on. The refrigerated car was never on. Yeah. It was the mindset. He thought he was freezing to death and did. Now, I'm not sure if that was true or not. It was
Right.
told to me as a kid, and again, I didn't do the research, but that's sort of a picture of how powerful our brain really can be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great ending.
Maybe not for a great ending in that story, but
No, no,
in
no.
showing.
But you know, as a challenge to that, I mean, if he really was convinced that it was 20 below, he should have spit on the floor and waited for it to freeze,
Right.
right?
And just like your Tasmanian story, I
Right.
mean, you can tell. They fooled themselves, and you started off, and that was not planned, by the way, saying, Simon, you fooled yourself and saying
No, it
you
was
can't do
completely
it.
unplanned. It
Yeah,
was
and
like,
it's true when you're like,
Right.
oh, got it. You're right.
Right.
That's me doing that to myself, saying I can't do it.
So like a kid, like a smart, like usually kids are not dumb, they're smart.
Yeah.
Each in their own way, but they're spontaneous. So they're a pain in the ass because they tell the truth. They have audacity. But in that spontaneity and audacity comes out these moments of truth. So if you got some stiff-necked, you know, authoritarian in the room and the kid says, well, that's ridiculous, and they take him to task, you know,
Right.
they'll do all this. But maybe the kid is observing something. Like I had that kid moment when I said to you, you know,
Yeah.
look at what the power you
And
have.
it was very true,
Right.
and I liked it, and
Right.
it made me think, challenge yourself.
Right, but it's like, but it's like, it's also how do we do it? It's like, do we do it like I'm smart and you're a dummy? If I say it to that, or somebody says it to me that way, they're being destructive,
Right.
and they're building a wall of resentment and
Right.
mistrust.
Right.
Or if they say to me, "It's so funny. Do you realize what you did?" Right? I'm like, oh, I never really thought of it that
Right,
way. You're right, you
right,
know?
right.
So when we're in that kid state of honest, of powerful observance,
Yeah.
we can empower each other to step out of that room of false realization, you know?
So your challenge for the next week, month, year, for the rest of your life, one step at a time.
Absolutely.
Dial into that.
And the body and the mind, they're actually connected.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're not floating above.
No floating.
All right, Reclaiming Timeless Ways, Mike Traster, Simon Fuller. Appreciate you joining us this week or in this episode, and look forward to chatting with you again real soon. Have a nice day.